Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:07 on O'Connor and Company. Good morning. Thanks for tuning in here to our little morning extravaganza. Coming up at 7:35, Richard Goldberg, Foundation for Defense of Democracies. We'll get his take on the Persian Street and how the efforts in Venezuela that we saw over the weekend actually will affect freedom in Iran. Then at 8:05, Dr. Peter McCullough on your new vaccination schedule for your kids here in America. That's coming up. Larry O'Connor, Julie Gunlock under the weather this morning, so we will keep her in our thoughts and prayers. Joining us now, Dustin Grage, investigative journalist at Townhall, a columnist there, and he's based in Minnesota. Dustin really came onto the scene when Tim Walz was plucked out of nowhere by Kamala Harris to be the running mate, and Dustin's like, oh, I know this guy. And your columns have been vital since then, Dustin. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Larry. Happy to be here.
What an extraordinary day yesterday. Tim Walz opts out of re-election after he had already formed his re-election campaign, was already in the midst of it, raising money. What really happened here? Because Lord knows from his statement yesterday, I have no idea. What do you think?
No, it's quite incredible, Larry. And I'm old enough to remember back in July when he had released a statement his staff did to the Star Tribune here in Minnesota, our largest paper, that if he were to run for a historic third term, that he's going to win in a landslide. Well, here we are 6 days now into the new year, and he didn't even make it that far. It's absolutely incredible. But at the end of the day, what really won this was the Rufo report bringing older stories to light and exploding them, which then accelerated this independent journalism that's coming across the state of Minnesota. Like, I mean, I've been doing it for a while, and my stuff has been blowing up, no question. But then it brought these other characters involved, like a Nick Shirley and a Nick Soter, and all these other people started raining in on Minnesota and started covering stories, frankly, that nobody else was covering. Yeah. And then it just developed into this swirl of a tidal wave, and eventually it just became too much for Tim Walz, to the point where he actually called the cops on one of the independent journalists just standing outside his house and reporting. So it's incredible, and it just got to him at one point, and he decided, I can't win re-election, so I'm going to try to dodge accountability by handing the reins over to potentially Amy Klobuchar here, and then when she has to vacate her seat, if she were to win, she is going to appoint him to the U.S. Senate. So that's currently his current plan right now.
Wait. Let's just be clear here. So the idea is Klobuchar is going to become governor, and as the new governor, she appoints Walz as the senator?
That is correct. That is the current plan. Larry, like when he originally came onto the scene as a potential vice president candidate, he was maybe in the top 5 at one point. I was screaming from the roof 2 weeks before it actually happened that he will be the next VP candidate, and people called me crazy.
I remember.
The same sources that let me know that information when he was starting to get the vetting papers and when everything was getting lined up, they are saying this right now as well. They are very close to the governor, and this appears to be the new plan.
Wow. Now, you just said something really important. First of all, 2 things that you just said, Dustin. First of all, it's true. Tim Walz blamed what he called a right-wing media on his downfall here. That's another way of saying journalists, basically journalists doing journalism, right? Because it's not like you don't have newspapers and TV stations there in the Gopher State. So is there any shame right now in the Minnesota media circles when they recognize that these are all stories that were just sitting there waiting to be reported, but it took crazy right-wingers like you to get there?
Yeah, no, there's no question. And don't get me wrong, there are conservatives in these newsrooms, and they personally let me know, like, hey, when I hit a roadblock in my newsroom and someone stops my story, I usually get handed it. And then I post it on Twitter and it blows up. Or they just let me know, hey, we tried this story once and it just didn't get the traction. Because that does happen on occasion too, but it just doesn't get the traction. Okay. But the moment Tim Walz stepped into this national spotlight, Larry, that is when everything just exploded. And it's going to be the same case with Amy and any Minnesota politician, frankly, that ever goes national. Tim Pawlenty came back after he ran for president. Michelle Bachmann came back after she ran for president. Two very popular conservatives nationally, especially at the time when they were doing it. Yeah. They almost lost. Tim Pawlenty got crushed in his primary. And Michelle Bachmann, who is beloved by conservatives, came within half a percentage point of losing in one of the most conservative districts in the country. So when these politicians in Minnesota go national and they come back home, they usually don't do well. And that's the case for Tim. And frankly, it's also going to be the case for Amy if she were to run. So I don't think it's a walk in the park for them still. There's still going to be an uphill battle. This fraud is attached to all of them, and it's going to sink them.
We're speaking to Dustin Grage. He's an investigative journalist and a columnist at Townhall, colleague of mine over at Townhall. Dustin, you also mentioned that he was going to lose. And that I said earlier in the show, the only reason a politician does what Tim Walz did yesterday is because they're going to lose, and they'd rather go out on their own terms rather than lose an election. Does that mean basically some elder statesman had to tap him on the shoulder and say, Tim, it's time to go? Otherwise, we're going to have Mike Lindell as the governor. I mean, Mike Lindell really is the only Republican right now of prominent. Or you tell me, is there another option there for Minnesota Republicans?
Oh, yeah. There's actually a very popular good slate here. And Mike Lindell's going to be the national name people recognize. But we've also got the Speaker of the House running, Lisa Damith. We've got the chair of the Fraud and Oversight Committee in Kristen Robbins. We have some very, very good lawyers running that are going to have a good bankroll. I mean, there are actually like a lot of candidates. There are probably 4 or 5 on the list that I think could win. There's no question we have a great slate of candidates. And also, from what I've heard, there are some big names that might get involved here. They include the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and even Elon Musk. They are dead set on winning the state. And I just recently learned, it was actually quite incredible, Elon Musk is actually a Minnesotan. Now, his great-grandfather did rodeo in Minnesota throughout his life to pay for college. And his grandfather was born just a couple hours north of me here in Minnesota. He actually has Minnesotan roots, and he's starting to bring this all up now. And I'm like, why are you starting to bring this up? And I just have to think, maybe he wants to get heavily involved. I mean, he's been pushing all the fraud stuff. It sounds like his PAC might be interested. So
that would be fascinating.
On Minnesota, no doubt about it.
Dustin, earlier we played some audio from your exclusive investigative report there on the Somali fraud issue, and I want to draw some attention to it because you're taking a different angle here, and that is, listen, the people of Minnesota and the people of this country, we have big hearts, we are charitable, we do want some of our tax dollars to go to people who need it, and most specifically to children who require special services. And so you interviewed a woman who runs an autism center that is doing great work for children with autism. My son has autism. I know how great these people are and how great these centers are. They're now suffering because of the fraud that was allowed to happen under Keith Ellison and Tim Walz. Tell me what you learned here.
Yeah, so basically what's happening is after a decade of completely ignoring these fraud issues, Republicans have been screaming from the rooftops, but they've gone on and ignored them. And what that has resulted in is potentially hundreds of millions of dollars in fraud in the area of autism services alone. So then what happens is Tim Walz takes this dirty backwater and he throws the baby out with it. And that's quite simply what it is at this point. They did no actual audits to determine, like, who are actual trusted providers who have been in service for 20 plus years, run on the thinnest of margins, and then slapped every single provider in the state with 90-day holds on their payments. But when you have hundreds of employees, hundreds of children, because in many cases, these are one-to-one. Like, when we're talking about autism centers like this is low-functioning autism kids. They are nonverbal. They sometimes are disruptive. They aren't even allowed in some public schools. So they need special services, one-on-one attention, and quite frankly, they also not only get better attention at these autism centers, but it's actually provided to the taxpayer at a cheaper rate. Yeah, they do it more efficiently than government.
Yep. So and the children actually do see progress in those scenarios. Yeah, it's everything that's right with programs like this, but they're the ones suffering because of everything that's wrong with the fraudulent. Unbelievable, and the stories just boggle the mind. Dustin, we got to leave it there, but don't be a stranger. Yeah, Minnesota is suddenly the center of the American political conversation, and Dustin's been covering it like no one else. Thank you so much for doing great work, Dustin.
Thanks, Larry.